So, Mr. Garvey, the first question I have is actually going out of left field, no pun intended. Not about baseball, but instead, I remember hearing that when you were at Michigan State, you were also a football player. You were a multi-sport athlete. For anyone who does not know, in your opinion, I think how good were you playing for the Michigan State Spartans football team?
Well, it's a great question because I came out of Tampa, Florida, and I was kind of an East-West quarterback there, and had a lot of success. But I really originally went up on a baseball scholarship, and then Duffy Daugherty, the great old Irish coach there at Michigan State, had heard about me. So they both got a hold of me, both coaches, on my initial visit, and said, "We want you to come here, and you can play both sports." And then Duffy said, and we have 22,000 co-eds, so you're going to have a date on Friday night for sure, which was very appealing to me. My mother didn't care about that. But yeah, I played 2 years of football at Michigan State, and I always thought it was a key ingredient for me as ultimately a professional baseball player, because sports have a tendency to have specific skills that transcend, and I think the things I learned in football transcended to my baseball game, and gave me endurance and that perseverance, and ended up being a long career.
So after you played football and baseball for Michigan State, you were drafted by the Los Angeles Dodgers in 1968, I want to say, and you started playing minor league baseball right out of college in Ogden, Utah. So what was it like starting out as a professional baseball player, not just for the Dodgers, but just playing in just a professional uniform in the minor league organization?
Well, my first manager was Tommy Lasorda, the infamous Tommy Lasorda, and this was his third year managing the Ogden Dodgers. And I remember coming into the Ben Lomond Hotel when I had signed and flown in from Tampa, and there was Tommy at the desk. He turned around, and he goes, "This must be the Garv." And I went, "Who's this guy?" And he said, "Son, your life changed forever." And it did, because over the next 10 days, it was the rookie league preparation, for short season like Northwest. He emphasized to us that now we were playing for the front of the jersey and not the back of the jersey, which meant now as a professional, you're playing for an organization. Of course, the Dodgers were historic. And then to be able to learn the Dodger way, which really was sound fundamentals and executing, hit and runs and bunts and moving runners over and throwing strikes and all those kind of things that led to a great history. So we learned in 10 days about the great organization, what was expected of us as professionals.
So after a year in the minor leagues, you made your debut in 1969 with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Take me through really what was it like playing for the Dodgers in your first game in 1969?
Well, I'd come out of Michigan State, taking my last final that summer, and joined the Albuquerque team first week in June. Ended up hitting 372. Great place to hit that Albuquerque, and the ball travels and it's hot and dry. And normally, as most baseball fans know, in September a team can bring up 4, 5, 6 minor league players. So myself, Bill Buckner, Bobby Valentine, Tom Pashorek all came up, and I flew in on September 1st, and LA the first time, and the palm trees, and flying over the ocean, and then coming up to the entrance of Dodger Stadium, and then coming into the ravine and seeing this cathedral of baseball for the first time was pretty inspiring. And we took early batting practice, and I was hitting balls, into the bullpen and bleachers in center and right. And we were playing the Mets that day, and I'm sitting on the bench. It's the end of the bottom of the 8th inning. We're down 3-0, and the pitcher was due up with 2 outs. And Walt Olson, the great manager, looks at me and says, "You ready, kid?" And I said, "Yes, sir." So I grab a bat and put a helmet on and go up to the plate, and I'm facing a left-handed setup pitcher by the name of Jack Delora. So I get in the box, he throws me a little cutter in, and I turn on it and just miss the foul pole by about 10 feet. Next pitch, I'm thinking, well, typical lefty, he'll go away. Tailing fastball, hit it down the right field line, just missed the foul ball by 5 feet, and I'm thinking, this isn't too tough, So I get back in, and I'm waiting for something, in the strike zone, and he winds up and he throws, and I start to go after it, and it's a screwball, and it tails away and sinks, and I swing, and the bat comes out of my hand and lands in the grass in left field, so which is a long way. And I'm there I'm still wide-eyed. The worst thing to do when you've struck out is to go back to the dugout with nothing in your hands. So I get back to the dugout, and there's Walter Olson, and he said, "Well, kid, that was pretty auspicious. You set a record for keeping a bat thrown fair at Dodger Stadium." And he said, "You took some pretty good cuts, so you probably get a couple thousand hits when it's all over, and get them this week in Houston." And ended up with basically 2,600 hits. And my first at bat was a strikeout. My last at bat was a strikeout. But in between, I had a pretty good career.
So starting off, really, the number of accolades that you've had over the course of your Major League career, starting in 1974. You won the National League MVP, you were a Gold Glove, you got your first All-Star appearance at Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh, including getting the MVP for that All-Star game. I want to start off with basically what was it like playing in your first All-Star game, starting at first base for the National League?
Well, it was very unique because there was a groundswell. I'd started the season very quickly. In my hometown of Tampa, they had the Tampa Tarpons, Class A minor league team. And some friends of mine, without me knowing it, had started this campaign to get my name written in the ballot because I wasn't on the ballot, wasn't listed. Back then, you punched out the little chads, and they counted that way. So all of a sudden, it caught up around the country. I was leading the National League in home runs and RBIs, and when the balloting ended, I had over 1 million write-in votes, and was the first and really only write-in starter in history. So unfortunately, I came down with the mumps about 5 days before the game. Fortunately, the doctor okayed me to go to Pittsburgh. Didn't have a chance to practice, no batting practice because of rain that afternoon. I get up in the second inning, and prior to the game, Yogi Berra said, "Well, kid," he said, "we know you've been sick. Play 3 innings, we'll get you out." I said, "Well, thanks, Yogi." So I get up, and I'm facing Louis Tiant, who had all these gyrations. He throws me a slider away. I swing and miss, almost fall on my face. I get up, I look to the heavens, "Lord, just please let me get a hit." And I end up with a double. Get up again in the 4th inning, get another double, a couple RBIs. Yogi has a wild inning and pinch hits Perez and Stargell. And the inning's over, and he said, "Well, kid, great game." I said, "Who are you going to put in?" He said, "Well, I'm going to put in Stargell." I said, "You pinch ran for him." And he looked at me, he goes, "What about Perez?" I said, "You pinch ran for him." So he says, "Well, looks like you got to play the whole game." So I was the only player for both teams to play the whole game, won the MVP with the mumps. So it's a pretty good start.
In 1974, that was also the first time that you went to the World Series. It was the first of 4 times that you went to the World Series. 5 times, my mistake. 4 times with the Dodgers in 1974 against the Oakland Athletics. Unfortunately, the Dodgers lost. But first, just take me through the experience of just playing in the Fall Classic against Oakland.
Well, you dream about it. You play in the backyard. In Florida, we had grapefruit trees and orange trees, and I'd hit the little fruit, and that'd be Dodgers and Yankees and World Series, and all of a sudden, dreams come true, and now you're playing in your first World Series, and although it wouldn't be the Dodgers and the Yankees till 77, 78, and 81, it was still the A's. It was their 3rd straight World Series, and playing a veteran team, and it was pretty exciting, but had a good World Series. I think I hit over 330, 340. And although we lost in 5 games, they were well-played games, close games, and that was the beginning of really the first year of Garvey, Lopes, Russell, and Cey, the great infield, that would stay together, of course, play 4 World Series and become world champions.
Continuing on with, you were mentioning about the Dodger infield, continuing on with, of course, the huge offensive performance that the Dodgers had basically the entire decade in the 1970s, not only through Lopes and Cey and Russell, but there was also a time in 1977 the Dodgers were the first team in Major League history to have 4 separate players hit 30 home runs. That was you, that was Russell, that was Cey, and that was Reggie Smith, if I had to say it was the 4th one.
Yeah, Reggie Smith, Dusty Baker, Cey.
Oh, Dusty Baker. Yeah. Okay, my mind was still on the infield.
I know. We're making a quick transition.
Yes.
This may have to be a 2-parter. No, but it was one of those seasons where that was probably the best team I'd ever played on, and we would put other teams away by the 3rd or 4th inning. We had power, we had speed. But to do that, took some real consistency that year. And that was Tommy Lasorda's first year. he asked for more power from us. I had a streak of 200 hit seasons, and he's, Garvey, I need more power. He said, you can sacrifice a few hits, but I need more power. So I had 33. Cey had 30. I think the other two guys had 30, 31. But we were the first guys to do that. We took a lot of pride in it. And Dusty Baker did it on the last day of the regular season against one of the great pitchers, J.R. Richard, in, I believe, the 8th inning. So it was literally the last at bat to be able to accomplish that. And he did it. So they celebrate us every year at Dodger Stadium with bobbleheads to commemorate.
It's definitely an amazing achievement that you guys did at Dodger Stadium. Also, I want to talk about an individual achievement that I found out started back in 1975 when you played for the Dodgers. You played in 1,207 straight games. That went back to 1983. That is the 4th longest streak as of the time of this interview in MLB history. What was the key to playing in these consecutive games, getting your body ready to play all these games?
Well, it is. It's 4th all time, number 1 in the National League. I guess it was when people ask me about accomplishments, I mention that close to the top because I think it made a statement for my commitment to the game, to my team, to the fans. There were many times where I could have sat out. I had migraine headaches. I had hyperextended elbow. I had a hairline fracture, a finger, pinky. Days where you just don't feel good. Days where maybe there are some personal things that are happening in your life. But I felt an obligation to my team, and especially the fans. It's so very, very important. I always say if a fan, say a family of 5 drove from Bakersfield for 4 hours to see me play, and I didn't go out because I had a little headache or a little stomach ache, then I wouldn't be much of a professional. So that drove me. A couple of hamstrings. Now I'd be on the 10-day IL. Back then we just wrapped it up and put some cream of Jezik on there, hot stuff, and you went out and played. So a little different, generations. But I think there are a lot of young guys now. Corey Seager with the Dodgers. We've talked many times. He's that gamer type of kid. So take a lot of pride in the streak.
Going back to the topic about the World Series, we talked a little bit about the 1974 World Series with the Dodgers losing to the A's. 1977, the Dodgers lost in 6 games thanks to a performance from he who shall not be named, Mr. October. 1978, the Dodgers did the same thing, but then in 1981, it was, if I remember correctly, the first year that the National League and American League had the division series. It was a very wild postseason. The Dodgers being the Houston Astros in the NLDS, the Expos in the NLCS, and then played the New York Yankees in 1981. Take me through that 1981 postseason that ended in your first World Series title.
Well, we knew we were running out of time because contracts were going to start to expire. Davey Lopes in 81. Ron Cey, myself, Bill Russell in 82. So we got off to a good start, but then after 110 games, or not 110 games, but somewhere in the 70s there, we had a strike, aka lockout. So that was for 6 weeks. We resumed with the All-Star game in Cleveland that year, but they had to devise a way to go into the postseason, so they came up with the first division series. So our NLDS was the first in history, and we beat Houston. Again, we were down by 2 in that first series, came back to win. Then we play Montreal. We split in Los Angeles, lose the first game in Montreal. Now we're down 2-1, so it didn't look good. We come back and win the last 2 games, and the last one was a fabulous game. Rick Mundy hit a home run, and I think it was the top of the 9th. And we go on to New York. Because we ran it the day before, we had no off day, so we started the World Series right away and lost those 2 games. So each of the series, we dropped the first 2. The New York press said, here we go again. Yankees going to dominate the Dodgers. Came back to L.A., and Fernando threw Game 3 and threw 152 pitches.
Oh, my God.
And we won 8-7. And the next day, I think Cey and I had big games. Then on the Sunday, I think Guerrero and Yeager and Cey hit home runs. So we go back with a 3-2 lead in New York, rained out. And then the next day we have a date with destiny. And I remember being at first base with Reggie Jackson. And Reggie, you can see it in the replays. He's talking to me. What he's saying is, Garvey, it's your turn. and he pats me on the behind. They don't do that anymore. And I looked up, and it was 11:59. And the next pitch, the fly ball goes to Kenny Landreau. He catches it, and we're a world champion. The boyhood dreams come true. So what happens? You run to the mound. Steve Yeager's picking up Steve Howe. Steve Garvey jumping over the pile. It's a great Sports Illustrated picture. We come down. Yeager spins Howe. Howe clocks me with his elbow, almost knocks me out. My hat falls off. I'm seeing stars. Then the Yankee fans typically are running on the field, so I grab my hat and I run off, and I get to the dugout, and I actually have to brace myself in the tunnel, because I was still woozy. But it would have been interesting to be out cold on the mound at Yankee Stadium 30 seconds after the last out.
Oh, well, that was amazing. That was really that was an amazing story right there. Yeah. And also, one final question. I had a couple more questions about your time with the San Diego Padres.
Sure.
You played with them for the final few years. I want to talk to you about one specific moment as a final question, because I'm being told that we only have a couple of minutes left. So it's Game 4 of the 1984
I'm gonna have
NLCS.
to sponsor a few more minutes. Who do I talk to? I'll talk to Mitch.
All right. No, it's Game 4, 1984 NLCS. Tony Gwynn's at first. Game's tied at 5. You're facing off against one of the best relievers in baseball, Lee Smith. Take me through that at bat.
And who I was 0 for 6 against. And it seems like I was always facing him in the shadows of Wrigley Field, him throwing 98. But I told Tony in the on-deck circle, I said, Tone, you just get on. And if you're in first, I'm going to try to drive the ball the other way. And if I can get it in the gap, I said, we're going to win this game. So he says, okay, Garv. So what does he do? Typical Tony. He singles to right. He gets on first. I look at him, and he touches his helmet. That was our signal. Here we go. So Lee Smith throws me a fastball up and away, and I take it. And I was on it pretty well. It was a good take. He takes a stretch, throws over to first to keep Tony close. And I'm thinking, well, he's not going to throw me a breaking ball. He's not going to fool around. And he's coming back at me. Next pitch was down a little bit, out over the plate. And 8 of my 10 biggest hits were to center and right. So I hit the other way pretty well. I hit down through it. It took off, and it was almost frozen in time. Remember the natural where he hits the ball and it's just going towards the light stand? And I had hit enough home runs to think that I pretty much thought it was out. So I'm running towards first, and I see Henry Cotto, the right fielder for the Cubs, climb the wall and reach up, and I'm thinking, oh my Lord, the greatest catch in postseason history. But it hits about 5 feet above it, and I hit first base and lift my arm up, which you see a lot of. I think I might have been the first guy to do that, and go around the bases, and that's the win, gets us to Game 5, and it was voted, that home run, the greatest sports moment in San Diego history this past year, so I take a lot of pride in that. But that game taught the San Diego fans what a winner looks like and acts like. The next day we jump out to a 3-0 deficit. And then the 5th inning, we have a ball that goes under the first baseman's legs, and a hit, and a ball off of Sandberg. I get a single, and all of a sudden it's 5-3, and then we bring in Goose Gossage for the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning, back when he brought in a closer for 3 innings. And we win and go to the World Series for the first time in San Diego.